The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Welcome to Sarah's Country, wherever you are listening or watching live or on demand around the world. You're an absolute champ, and it's my privilege as your host, Sarah Perium, to bring you the in-depth interviews on the matters that matter most to farming, food and fibre here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the bottom of the world. And I really mean around the world. I checked out our podcast stats actually last night after the show. Over 20,000 listeners a month. That has doubled in the past 4 months since we went live each day. Totally blows me away because I often get emails. And last night I had another one. It was from a gentleman who works for a New Zealand company in Europe, regularly watches, as do lots of sheep breeders in Scotland, I understand. And that leads me on to, I'm sure it's been around Facebook, but for those who haven't seen the news, did you hear about Double Diamond? 6-month-old Texel ram lamb that recently sold for nearly $500,000 at auction. Check out that beast. So this, for those who are just listening, Joel, could you just keep that photo up? This is Double Diamond, the Texel ram lamb, only 6 months old, $492,000. You're used to a name and a price like that, Double Diamond, on A-list celebrity, not the muscular butt of a sheep. I mean, I love the innocence though on the reporting when I was trying to find this photo on The Guardian. First line, this sheep clearly has some very fancy fleece. I do think that the fleece would have been the last thought on the mind of the buyer of this absolute meat machine. Now, let this be a warning to you. If we don't turn the tide on Strongwall, New Zealand, what could happen? Good on you, Double Diamond, and I'm sure the breeders of that will be certainly quite happy. Now, let's return to New Zealand for a moment, as for many listening and watching from our playground here in the bottom of the world, it may be a long future that this background is what we know, and how lucky we are that we have such a beautiful background to explore. Moving into level 2.5 in Auckland and 2 still around the country, we can still travel, even though we do have to wear masks. I am going to head back up to Waihi Beach to snuggle my favourite little niece, well, she's my only niece. And the last time I was there, I flew into Tauranga Airport, and it was actually the first time I'd actually been into Tauranga. And what an airport! Like, it new, gorgeous, friendly, lovely. So I've been meaning to ask throughout the show, and it just reminded me as I was heading back up there, what is your favourite regional airport in New Zealand to fly in and out of? Why? Or is it the amenities of the airport, or is it the parking better? I used to commute from Queenstown to Auckland, and it was horrible. Horrible. The tourists, the barging, the pushing, the parking, I don't miss it at all. And I know that it will be certainly different now. But, we have some unique places. I remember flying into Kirikiri once. What a outstanding little pencil plane that was. So I want to hear from you in the comments below. Where are you watching or listening live from, and what is your favourite regional airport? Let's celebrate them, because they are all very unique, aren't they? Joel, Gisborne, you haven't been to Gisborne yet, have you? But no, you went up for Rhythm and Vines. You must have flown, did you?
Yeah, but I flew up and met the crew in Auckland, so I didn't fly directly. So
outside Gisborne Airport, which I've never seen outside any of the ashtrays, they have cigarette butts only.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you get it, don't you? It's very Gisborne. I mean, I feel like I've been to a majority, but still on the bucket list I haven't been to is Hokitika, hopefully flying over for AgFest, New Plymouth, and of course the Chathams. I would absolutely love to know if we have listeners from the Chatham Islands. It's a bucket list of place for me to visit. If you are listening from the Chathams, can you please send us a message? Email me, sarah@perrymedia.com. It'd be great to have somebody on from the Chathams talking about farming over and fishing over there. The world is one big family. with this global media reach these days, despite our borders being in lockdown. And as we develop more into the show, I'm actually going to look to bring on more international guests and particularly farmers and growers around the world so that we can actually get in touch and understand the innovations and similarities that's going on. Sorry, that's one of our guests coming through. And of course, if you know of anybody, send us through on email and who you think might make a great yarn. On that note, the fabulous lineup, that person calling me, on which I'll get to. Science without uptake is interesting, but not useful. We heard last night from Dr. Trevor Suttridge from AgResearch. We're going to continue to talk to, after 7:20, to another member of AgResearch, Brooke Marshall. Now, commercialisation is at her core, this woman, and it has been on a mission to bring a new culture to researchers' way of thinking about the deal flow of their research projects. Fantastic interview from earlier I recorded today. After 7:30, our guest is not new to driving unemployment figures down. Clutha District Council Mayor Bryan Cadogan knows a thing or two about this from his days in the shearing industry. So he's using the opportunity of nearly $500,000 of government COVID relief funding to extend this funds to his neighbours in the Queenstown Lakes, Central Otago and Waitaki district to pair up those labour-short industries that we talk a lot about on Serious Country with the 10,000 plus, I'm getting told, unemployed that are going to flow out of the tourism town of Queenstown, especially as the ski season draws to a close. Now, to close the show, Wagyu calves have been perceived as pricey option for finishing, but farmers on the First Light Foods program are saying, you know what, it's worth it. And Managing Director Gerard Hickey is going to join us not only to discuss that, but they are raising money for KidsCanNZ in New Zealand through an auction. And while I've got Gerard there with Wagyu and also venison, I want to get to the bottom of what's happening with uncertainties in our global markets. And somebody who knows a lot about that, first up on the show, to kick us off once we are going to be outside of that European bloc post-Brexit in the UK, we're expected to become one of the 5th or 6th largest beef importing countries. Blake Holgate, Rabobank's animal proteins analyst, presents the Beef Quarterly Report and New Zealand's future opportunities. After the break and after I bring this person back. See you soon.
This is Serious Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
So much for Do Not Disturb iPhone. My apologies, but anyway, we've got our next guest on the line and the following guest who is calling me sorted, so we're under control. Now, as we said, Blake Holgate from Rabobank, the animal proteins analyst, has just recently presented the Beef Quarterly Report and what is New Zealand's future opportunities. As post-Brexit trade deals are set to play a role in determining the future of UK beef imports, local consumer preferences and non-tariff barriers will also heavily influence those who supply beef into this lucrative market in 2021. And as I said, agribusiness banking specialist Rabobank's latest report shows that the UK is this high-value yet small market for New Zealand beef. And Blake joins us now. Blake, this is an ongoing situation of trade negotiations. Obviously, the prize is there. How close are we getting?
Sorry, I just seem to have lost the sound. You tailed off towards the end there.
Up
until the question.
Oh, my apologies. I was just saying, the eye is on the prize with these trade negotiations. But how close are we getting?
Yeah, look, well, obviously COVID did delay those UK-EU negotiations earlier in the year. Talks intensified through their winter over the last couple of months. October the 1st has sort of been set down as a key date around starting to finalise what some of those trade agreements look like. Whether they reach that date and achieve that or not is probably yet to be seen. Obviously, they're dealing with a whole range of trade discussions and not just agriculture, not just beef. But yeah, at the moment, we should have a better indication by the start of October how close they are getting to some kind of final arrangement.
I'm interested to know around high value because, of course, a lot of our red meat in particular has moved into the retail space because food service has been shut down from lockdown. So why do the Brits value our beef as such high value? What work's been done in that market for them to perceive that?
Yeah, look, I think it's probably important to point out that the UK for beef is a very small market for New Zealand exporters. The UK as a whole, the EU as a whole probably represents 3 to 4% of our beef exports, and the UK within that is a very small section. And part of the reasons is we don't have the same tariff advantages that we have for something like lamb. So we're just not competitive with some of our lower cost beef going into the UK. We are still highly regarded around the quality of our product and some of those other attributes that we value highly around food safety, around the sustainability story, and that does play well in that market, and that has been, how we have been able to leverage existing relationships through those red meat channels.
Reading here in your Beef Quarterly report for Rabobank, those cheeky Irish are keeping an eye on New Zealand. Yeah,
look, they're probably the biggest. Have the most to lose in this situation. So currently they supply around 70% of the UK's beef, obviously at preferential or no tariffs as operating within that common EU community up until now. So if there is no agreement reached, in all likelihood, they'd revert back to sort of World Trade Organization standard rules and regulations and would face a significant increase in cost in getting their product into the UK, which would erode a lot of their competitiveness they have had. So they'll be watching very keenly and be looking for some kind of arrangement that can ensure they can, basically keep the tap on to their largest buyer.
I remember an American guest speaker, I can't remember his name, speaking at a red meat sector conference here in New Zealand, and he was talking about the Irish situation post-Brexit, and our Irish beef producers said, oh, so you're just telling me that all I need to do is drive my cattle up over the border and then technically I can get around it? I mean, what is sort of seeing to play out there around Northern Ireland being like that trade oasis for getting into the UK?
Yeah, well, that whole border and security and the flow of goods and services across that Irish border is one of the key issues that needs to be worked through in the whole trade negotiations. So that's one we will be keeping a keen eye on, and that will probably help to determine exactly what your Irish friend was talking about, and again, what opportunities or threats this represents for Ireland coming out the other side of this.
Let's talk about China. How are things looking there in terms of demand?
Look, in terms of overall animal protein or red meat demand from China, we're still seeing it is reasonably strong. If we look at beef, though, we have seen a drop-off in demand for New Zealand beef. We've seen a significant increase in competition from the South American beef exporters into China. Brazil, for the first 6 months of this year, increased their exports up over 150%, for example. So what that has done is those countries are generally lower value or lower cost beef producers. That's driven down the price that our exporters can get in that Chinese market at the moment. In the meantime, America is actually performing relatively well in terms of demand for that manufactured product. So export prices are holding up strong there. So we're seeing a significant proportion of New Zealand's beef being directed into that US market and away from China. But look, what we have seen over this past 6 months is incredible volatility in terms of demand and where our product has been going month to month. So I've seen massive swings between each month. So it's still a lot to sort of play up for the rest of this year to see those dynamics, particularly between China and the US, which are obviously key markets for us.
And of course here at home as well, in terms of schedules being quite volatile over the past quarter to now as well, what sort of the outlook look like from a Rabobank perspective to give some advice to farmers on any way of forecasting through this volatility?
Look, to date, or up until at least sort of the last couple of months, red meat prices have held up relatively well, considering the disruptions we've had in the market. With beef, those prices have continued to hold up reasonably healthily, again supported by the United States. We think we're probably hitting sort of close to the peak in pricing where we're going to see for this season. Struggling to see probably too much more upside. But in saying that, we think the fundamentals are still reasonably strong. So while we still would expect sort of probably softer pricing than we had last season, we think prices should hold, relatively hold the line, but certainly not see the strong uplift in schedule prices that we saw from this point in the season on last year.
Thank you so much, Blake Holgate, animal protein analyst for Rabobank. Before you sneak off, flying in and out of Dunedin can sometimes be hairy. Is Dunedin one of your favourite regional airports around the country, Blake, or have you got some other favourites?
Look, it's hard to go past Dunedin because I spend a lot of time there. Look, I actually really enjoy a lot of New Zealand's regional airports. I think generally we're probably pretty well served for the quality of airports we have, and considering the volume of traffic that traditionally has gone through them, and then possibly less so at the moment. But yeah, if I had to pick a favourite, it's pretty hard to go past Dunedin.
Thank you so much. There's that smell, isn't there, when you just walk out the door? Oh,
absolutely.
It's excellent. You know you're home, exactly. Thank you so much, Blake Holgate. Now, coming up in Serious Country, we are going to go to AgResearch to talk to Brooke Marshall. She's the commercialisation manager. Very cool title. Came after a decade in private practice as a IP lawyer, and her job is to gather the amazing low-hanging fruit of this wonderful research we have in New Zealand and turn it into dollars and cents. We'll hear from Brooke after the break. This is Sarah's Country. Set to fast-track cultural change within AgResearch and strengthen its commercialisation capability, whilst increasing revenue and deal flow along the way. Our next guest is a lawyer by trade, but a commercialisation champion at heart, vigorously working to apply a lean startup mindset to one of New Zealand's largest Crown Research institutes, AgResearch. Now, joining us now, she is a finalist in the 2020 KiwiNet Research Commercialisation Awards for making an outstanding contribution to commercialising public-funded research. And Brooke Marshall is with us. Congratulations, Brooke. This is a very prestigious award. It must be a real honour.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Sarah. Look, I'm absolutely delighted to be sort of mentioned in the same breath as people like Sue Muggleston and Ian Boddy, who are my co-finalists. But yeah, it's a real honour to be recognised for the hard work that my team and I have been putting in over the last couple of years.
Must have been an interesting cultural change, as we said there in the introduction, coming from a legal background into a science community. What was AgResearch like when you walked into this role as a commercialisation manager, and particularly around royalties and licensing and of research at the time?
So you're right, it is really, really different to private practice in a law firm. And so I did spend about a decade in private practice as a commercial lawyer, and I specialised in IP. So when I came into AgResearch, I guess I had a very sort of legal lens and an intellectual property lens. And so one of the things that I was really keen to achieve was to understand where the intellectual property was sitting in the organisation. Was there anything sort of still in the pantry that we hadn't taken out to market yet? And how could we make that transition from intellectual property or research outcomes just sitting on a shelf and actually making a real impact in the real world?
And a considerable amount of work that you have done, well, 349% of research you've been able to turn into a form of licensing income within your first year. So there was a few things in the pantry.
Yeah, there were. And I guess I think that's a consequence of being able to identify, I guess, the low-hanging fruit. The thing about commercialisation of publicly funded research is a lot of it is really deep technology. It can take 10 or 15 years from the research outcome to actually being usable in market. So a lot of the things that I was working with had been developed a decade earlier, and now their time had come. So I was really fortunate in that respect.
What is it like at the start when there is funding going into a particular piece of research? Early on in the day, the Crown is sort of like, let's just see where you go with this. And then if it's of interest, we'll work out how to commercialise. Has that environment changed now? Do we need to have partnerships earlier on within the concept of the research?
Yeah, look, my understanding is that for every piece of publicly funded research, there is an implementation pathway that is a key component of that research application. So scientists are thinking about how can this piece of research make that transition into a real world application really early. But I do think you're right, Sarah. I think there is an opportunity for our industry partners to engage earlier and deeper in some of these propositions, but they are quite risky. A large part of the work that we do within AgResearch is what we consider H3 research, which is Horizon 3. It's quite far off having an actual real-world application. So part of my job is to help de-risk some of that riskier research so that it can be taken up in market.
How do you do that?
Well, often it's taking something that's been proven in a laboratory and getting it tested in the field. So there are steps that you can take to try and progress a piece of research from almost conceptual or just one initial result into validating that result a few times to prove that it has legs, getting it to work in a real world environment to check that it's robust, and then identifying where in a market a piece of research could sit. Sometimes with some of our research, it's difficult to find an obvious place in the market if it is more speculative, blue skies thinking. But there are no right answers when it comes to commercialisation. Often what you find is the best strategy is to protect the intellectual property that you uncover and then see how it develops over time.
What's your strategy to building a culture with these scientists? Because a lot of them, no doubt, are passion projects and they don't really like letting go of their baby. But of course they have to turn a dime.
Yeah, look, that's true. And they do often say in the commercialisation profession, a big part of it is drowning puppies, if that's not too harsh a term. The hardest part is when you sort of talk to a researcher and say, look, I know you love your idea, but I just can't see a space in the market for this. I can't see an opportunity that's going to be generating revenue or being particularly useful. I think one of the biggest barriers to overcome walking into a research organisation without a PhD in my back pocket and without a science background is gaining that mutual respect from our researchers. I am just in awe every day of the astonishing creativity and innovation that our researchers are coming up with. I feel very privileged to be exposed to that kind of thinking. I see it as my job to support those ideas and take them from a concept into a real world application.
You said that you were a decade in private practice and specialising in intellectual property. As Kiwis, as a culture, and the way that we're so open and honest and sharing, is it to our detriment globally?
Yeah. To be fair, yeah, it is. And I think that we are, by global standards, I think we've been recorded as being one of the most trusting cultures in the world. So we tend to enter business arrangements with a very high level of trust that isn't necessarily reciprocated with international partners, perhaps. But we also talk, we are highly collaborative, and we do talk very freely, both within our own institutions and with our business connections. And that can sometimes harm our intellectual property position. And that can mean it's really difficult sometimes for us to protect our research ideas well enough to provide a competitive advantage that somebody can pick up in the future.
I can imagine you being sort of bad cop in those conversations. Oh, if it was for me, but I've got Brooke and we have to keep her happy.
Oh, look, one of the things that we have done over the last couple of years is we've implemented kind of an IP 101 education program. Intellectual property isn't something that our researchers necessarily learn as they go through their programs, even at the advanced degree levels, but it's an essential skill for operating, I think, in a CRI where we are tasked with generating revenue and we are tasked with providing those benefits to our industry partners. So we implemented an IP 101 program within the organisation to try and raise the level of awareness about what intellectual property is and why fundamentally confidentiality is a cornerstone of everything we do.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on being made a finalist in this particular category in the KiwiNet Research Commercialisation Awards. It's very prestigious and a fantastic opportunity to celebrate the direction we're moving with science and business communities coming together. So it's very exciting. I'll look forward to seeing how it all unfolds, Brooke. And I think there's a longer conversation that we could have again. So I'd love to have you back on the show.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. That's Brooke Marshall. She's the commercialisation manager at AgResearch after a decade as a lawyer, IP lawyer. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to head south to Clutha District to catch up with Bryan Cadogan. He's the mayor who's been given $500,000 to be able to assist with unemployment problems due to COVID. He doesn't believe that it is fair for him to have it, so he's extended his hand to Wagyu District Council, Central Otago, and of course where it's needed most, Queenstown. You'll want to have a listen out to this and see how your part of the primary sector can make the most of this Queenstown Job Expo coming up in October. There's going to be over 10,000 people unemployed as the ski season comes to a close, and they are hungry for jobs. All that up next on Sarah's Country. This is Sarah's Country.
Balance has its own team of innovation specialists. It's our job to lead the way, working with some of the most cutting-edge science and research. We've got partnerships with some of the best suppliers in the world, so our farmers get the very best products for New Zealand farms.
And in every region across the country, the conditions are very different, and farmers and growers' needs are too.
That's why we're always looking for solutions that are just right, like here at our Huntly Service Centre.
And here in Canterbury, we've got a self-service silo, so I can pick up fat when it suits me.
And here in Morrinsville, we've got a world-class mill. That means that we can safely deliver our customers with the freshest, highest quality feed and minerals.
It's about putting the customer first because that's what drives our business.
We've been focusing on faster turnaround of orders. We've got to get the right products to the right places at the right times.
Here in Taranaki, we've got New Zealand's only urea manufacturing plant. It's where we create our premium sustained fertiliser.
We're supplying nationwide and working locally. By getting to know you and what you want to achieve, we can help you get there.
And with the new My Balance platform, Balance has put my farm at my fingertips.
In fact, we offer support in all sorts of ways, sharing the best nutrition practice with farming families across the country. Whether we're talking about animal health, farm productivity,
or looking after our natural environment, sustainability underpins everything we do. We use our local expertise and the latest tools to help farmers and growers navigate the changing regulations, so you can leave your farm in great shape for the future.
And we can be really accurate, avoiding areas like wetlands and waterways with our award-winning Spread Smart tech. It makes the job far safer, more efficient, and gives you the best results.
When you've got access to that kind of know-how, you've got the support you need to make sure you're farming sustainably. It's that kind of thinking that'll keep us going for generations to come.
Together creating the best soil and feed on earth.
Now, if you've just joined us, welcome to Sarah's Country, and the comments in there, I'd love to hear from you. What is your favourite regional airport? We heard there earlier from Black Holgate, Dunedin. Naturally, he's going in and out of there. I was saying Tauranga was pretty special, but I do go in and out of Hawke's Bay a lot, and I do think that it's a beautiful place, coming in there with the sea on one side and over the lagoon. But of course, as I said, I'd love to go to Hokitika for AgFest. Palmerston North, naturally, going in and out of there all the time as well, flying over those windmills. What is your favourite? Tell me some of those little ones that you may have to travel regularly to, and what makes them. As Blake said, we're very, very lucky to be able to get around our regional borders by flying regionally, especially under this particular. Talking about borders, Joel told me he won't go on air, but you should have heard what he said about the Irish borders. The breaking. So that was me throwing you under the bus. Joel, just on that, I've just actually been Googling regional airports and what makes them unique in New Zealand. Did you know in Gisborne, it is the first place in the world that has a train running across the runway? A railway line running across the runway.
Oh, that would make time in landings fun, wouldn't it?
Anyway, I'd love to hear from you in the comments wherever you are watching live, and I'd love to know where you're watching live from. Our next guest is coming out of the mighty Bell Clutha, and I had a wonderful phone call from his brother, Mayor Tim Cadogan from the Central Otago District Council, my home area, saying that this was going on in terms of a mayoral task force to utilise and make it efficient, the use of government funding to pair up the unemployed throughout those areas with the large labour shortage. And joining us now on the phone is Bryan Cadogan from Clutha. Good evening, sir. Well done. And how did it come about, my first question, that you got your hands on some funds, yet some of the other district councils didn't, and you felt that it was the best thing to do?
I just presumed they wouldn't give the money to Tim, and you can hardly blame them. No, in all honesty, it's the size of the district. So there's 21 rural provinces, and up until recent times, both Waitaki and Central were rural, but you've just topped your population somewhere around 20,000 cut off. So they must out, but Clutha's still hanging on. We got our share of the money, which is just great. And I think that it's something that's always been dear to my heart, and unemployment things like Ready Steady Work and dating and the jobs in Clutha. So it's just really extrapolating out from that.
Yeah, tell us about those days back in the day. You shared with me earlier how proud you are of ensuring that you squashed the unemployment numbers, especially particularly in the shearing industry.
Yeah, well, for me, there was periods of my life in the 80s where I was either unemployed or underemployed for a long time, and it certainly pulled back the life trajectory. I got the chance. I sort of looked at society from a different lens, sharing sheds, and I saw a lot of people like myself that they had to, because unemployment isn't ever anything to do with employment. It's to do with the social issues and what's going on in your life at the time. So through the sharing, through the business, through owning a farm, through my different life experiences, I suppose I look at things a wee bit different, maybe. Having been unemployed, I know that I did. And boy, when I got the mayoralty and actually was able to set up a job incentive scheme like Ready Steady Work for the youth unemployed, of course it's spun the wheel. It's probably been the thing I'm most impassioned about.
So when you picked up the phone, of course, to Brother Tim and then Jim Bolt in the Queenstown Lakes District Council, who's been heavily affected, the numbers must have been staggering in terms of what we're dealing with this humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, we've been dealing with this from a civil defence perspective right through COVID, and we knew that things it's really lumpy across the target. So Originally, the mandate I was given for spending the money was in Clutha. But I think from a moral perspective, the issues are really around the cargo, and it would be foolhardy of us all if we didn't start hunting as an Otago pack. Because if you look at the different dynamics, whereas Queenstown's got a lot of people that need jobs, you go to Central Otago and there's a lot of fruit pickers that need people. We've perpetually been unable to attract the workforce that we've needed to propel our economy. Waitaki's pretty much the same. Dunedin, maybe the jury's out in Dunedin, but if we hunt as a pack and start pushing things together, basically. So I should explain what the speed dating concept is that we're looking at. We keep it pretty raw and pretty feral. I know when I was unemployed, I would talk myself out of any opportunity. I didn't think I was good enough. I would avoid any confrontation as I saw it, which was a job interview. So putting that together, what we do is we get the employers, the people that can actually make the decision on the spot. The HR managers, the senior management to sit on one side of the table, and we get the people that need the job to sit on the other side for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it takes, speed dating. And if they like the cut of your jib, they're signing you up there and then. So there's an immediacy to it. And when we're talking of figures in Queenstown of around that 9,000, when we're talking of figures for fruit pickers needed of over 6,000, we're going to have to file them through. So you might gather I'm just a wee bit excited about it. It's a chance of a lifetime.
Oh, absolutely, especially when that's what spins your wheels, Bryan. And thank you so much for your kindness to extend that. When I spoke to Tim, I said, well, there's a lot of contractors in Southland, dairy farmers in Mid-Canterbury. I mean, to the wider New Zealand jobs shortage in particular industries, which on Sarah's country we find out is pretty much nearly every single primary sector. How do these groups become involved? Is it just limited to these particular regions of shortages?
So, in all honesty, this has come together so fast, and there's an immediacy, and it's just going like a steam train at the moment. The employers, pretty much the fruit growers, need the preeners right now. I know that our industries, the primary industries like the freezing works, the clock's ticking pretty loudly. But to have come up with the idea for Queenstown, because Queenstown we knew from COVID times when we were dealing with the civil defence with the highest numbers, but we are now seeing the need is wider. But logistically, it's just me, and well, it's not even me. At my side, I've got Ruth Ratcliffe, who has always been volunteering and working with me when we've done the ready steady work and the speed dating and Clutha. And she would be the person that I would say is the most preeminent person to be able to work with people in this situation that I've ever met in all my time of forever. I rate her pretty highly, so I'm glad that I've got her at my side. But I would love to go out everywhere, but just the capacity for us to do it. At the moment, I think we're on day 13 or something of doing it. We're throwing it together blindingly fast. And I would love to go everywhere, but at the moment we truly, with the capacity is for a cargo, there is the fact that for the likes of Fonterra, for Silverton Farms, for Alliance, for the police, for those wider ones, technically the mandate we got was that we have to have 50 full-time jobs for NEET and small to medium-sized businesses. But I appreciate the fact that MSC, our regional commissioner, Jason Tibble, and Emma Hamilton and the team realised the issues that Otago was facing, and they've given us some latitude. And so I said as an outcome, like if a person ends up going to the Cromwell, Central Polytech, I'll call it Cromwell, but I've probably got the wrong name. If they end up going to university, if they end up getting a full-time job, whatever the outcome is, and if that means they go and work for Fonterra in the middle of the North Island, it might not be much use for a target, but it's a whole lot of use for the individual. And at the very essence of what's trying to be done here, we've got to have the people that are in a corner, that are being challenged like never before, and a positive outcome, whatever it is what we're going to pursue.
Okay, so I'm a rural contractor, a fencing contractor, shearing contractor, for instance, or even a farming and growing operation listening to this, and I want to get in front of these versatile, unemployed people that potentially may be interested in my job that I can't fill. How do I become involved in the Queenstown speed dating of pairing up the unemployed with those shortages?
We would love to have anyone on board that has options, be it training or be it jobs. So if you contact me, or if, unfortunately I haven't got Ruth's telephone number, but if you contact us, it's going to be on the 10th of October. And interestingly, what we're also trying to do is, we know fine well that there's a lot of foreign nationals, and there's a humanitarian responsibility that I believe that we all have, that this issue of what are the foreign nationals doing, where are they with the visas, from my point of view, I've listened to it too long. It's not right that we've got people sitting in limbo, not knowing whether they go back home, get a job, whatever. So on the 9th of October, we will be with immigration at the same event centre, and we will be trying to sort out the visa situation with immigrants, with the foreign nationals and with immigration, so that they can participate on the day. And if we can't get that they have an outcome so that they know where they're going with their lives. If that means going back home, well, I don't want to say that at the moment. All I want to do is that we have a positive trajectory for them, be it whatever immigration decides. We've got to bring this matter to a head. We can't have them sitting in limbo as the wage subsidies go off, as food parcels start getting stretched. It's not good enough.
When you have a yarn to Jim Bolt in the Queenstown Lakes District Mayor, what COVID funding is he getting in terms of solving this massive crisis he has on his back door?
In all honesty, Jim's been fantastic to deal with. Everything that we've asked for, it's been there in a flash. And I know that, like the rest of us, COVID is putting challenges in front of us like never before, but I haven't specifically asked him what else he's been getting, but Jim's been great to deal with. In fact, everyone that we've approached right throughout, because we did a road trip last week going to Queenstown, Central, Waitaki and then Dunedin, and everyone's been so positive. And I think as New Zealanders, we can see that our fellow Kiwis and foreign nationals are in a corner. It's time to roll your sleeves up and do something about it. So we couldn't ask for a more positive response than what we've had to date.
Absolutely. And we have one of that in that situation sitting right here. So I live with it daily in terms of the struggles that Joel is facing with his visa extension as well. All going well, it will be fine, which will be wonderful. Thank you so much, Bryan, for joining us on Serious Country. Bryan Cadogan, the Mayor of Clutha District. And if you would like to get in touch with how to participate as an employer or an industry organisation, feel free to send me an email and I'll pass you on to Bryan and the team. So sarah@periamedia.com, or send me a message through any of the social media platforms that we're on as well. Now, coming up to close on Serious Country, we are going to head up into where I was saying where that train goes across the tarmac to First Light Foods. Wagyu is certainly a fantastic, well sought after product for consumers, but from a farm management system, is the uptake of finishing Wagyu calves too pricey for some? The ones that are on the First Light program say no, it's worth it. There's a lot to discuss with our next guest, Gerard Hickey, after the break. This is Serious Country.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. You reckon it'll come out? Cover it in talcum powder, leave it 10 minutes, and you'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You caught a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
like electric fencing.
Or horse feed.
Or bee suits.
Children. Chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this. But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help your farm,
Grow, milk, drench.
Rhea, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Well, you may have seen in the recent Farmers Weekly, the Chapmans from Rockburn Farming have been involved in the Wagyu program for some time with First Light. The article also outlines the amazing work that First Light are doing with a charity auction raising money for KidsCanNZ. Joining us now is Gerard Hickey from First Light. How are you tonight, Gerard? Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We've got a few things to cover, but let's firstly talk about this charity auction.
We'll do. Certainly, we produce some of the best beef in the world. The Rockburns, Evan and Claire Chapman have produced the best, the most valuable animal we've ever produced. Just under $4,000 they got paid for this animal. Produces, we think, some of the best Wagyu that we've ever produced, and we thought what better thing to do with this than to donate one of the ribeyes, so 6.8 kilos. So there's an auction site. I just had a look at it before coming on air. $985 is the current bid that closes on the 4th of September. So we're looking at raising whatever we possibly can and donating that to KidsCanNZ, a great charity.
Fantastic. So how many people would it normally feed?
You and I would probably go halves, but for anyone else, probably 30 to 40 people, I imagine, of a decent steak each.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Okay, yeah. I've got an idea. Dean Williamson, Farmers Weekly Christmas Party. Just doing a wink because I know people will be watching. And for those who are not familiar with why Wagyu is so pricey, I mean, when I heard the story about Kobe beef, for instance, but New Zealand being grass-fed Wagyu, what a story.
Yeah, well, it is known, it obviously comes from Japan. It's had centuries in Japan initially for the samurai soldiers, so it was only for the elite. We're lucky enough to have some of those genetics here in New Zealand for the last 25 years. We're the only people globally producing enough grass, but it's a unique, highly marbled, and with that, therefore, a sweet, nutty flavour, very juicy, very luxurious. You certainly wouldn't sit down and eat the same size of steak as you would anywhere else. You'd typically have a smaller portion, but you'd enjoy every single mouthful.
Absolutely. And when we eat less meat as a globe, we will consume better meat, and the best meat will be in demand, of course, New Zealand Wagyu.
That's the mantra.
Yeah. In this particular article, the newsmaker in Farmers Weekly's paper this week, there is a lot of different perceptions around the farm management of Wagyus and a lot to overcome. What are some of those things that do you think the misconceptions farmers have about taking on finishing Wagyu?
Just like what you just mentioned, it's really, are we in the volume game or are we in the value game? So yes, certainly for a Wagyu calf, you'll pay a bit more money, probably $150 more to buy the calf to start with, and then they need to be fed well throughout their lives. But out of that comes a high value carcass or animal at the end. So certainly you get the value between buying and selling, and you get certainty with it, certainty of price. So it's more about, are we producing value or volume? Certainly if you're looking at dollars per hectare or dollars per farm, we think Wagyu can more than stack up.
And from an animal as a breed perspective, what do they like to handle?
Oh, they're lovely. I get almost daily videos and pictures of our farmers, specifically the Wagyu dairy cross, but also some of the Wagyu Angus cross, where they're scratching between their ears, or the temperament really is a key attribute of the animal. Remembering that largely hand-bred, the dairy cross ones are hand-bred, so that helps as well.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. I see a press release come out from LIC that the demand for sexed semen is through the roof, especially around bobby calves. And the situation we have here with 70% of our beef in New Zealand coming from dairy cross beef, putting Wagyu over it just really changes the game.
Yeah, well, LIC is an important business partner of ours, producing our calves for over 400 farmers, 400 dairy farmers. But isn't it amazing that we can get this best beef in the world, being the Wagyu breed, put it across a Kiwi cross cow, or an Angus again, but a Kiwi cross cow, known for its perhaps yellower fat and those sort of characteristics, but producing what is some of the best beef we've ever seen. So dairy beef perhaps gets a bit of a bad rap. When you actually put the Wagyu across it or a beef breed across it, you're producing something that eats very, very well. May not always look the best as the live animal, but in terms of the finished product and eating it, you can't beat it.
And what about different markets? We spoke earlier to Black Holgate around what's happening in the UK, even though it is a small market in comparison to the demand for our beef in the US, but also where China's at with Brazil coming back. For this particular high-end premium New Zealand beef, what are your major markets and more easier than others?
Well, because we're the only people producing grass-fed Wagyu, 100% grass-fed Wagyu, really need to go to markets that are going to pay more and want the whole grass-fed story, which is antibiotic-free, GMO-free, all of those sorts of attributes. And that tends to be both here in New Zealand, but also we found the west coast of USA, certainly parts of Europe like Switzerland, perhaps into the UK itself. But China we'd still see as largely looking for and preferring a grain-fed product rather than a grass-fed Wagyu. So markets that are really wanting to buy the best, but also care about the planet and the animal and the people that grew the products, such as the Chapmans.
Now let's turn to venison. There's an article here reading, sell venison or risk loss. Deer farmers are being advised to take the going price for chilled venison, which has plummeted. You've been in the venison game a lot longer than Wagyu. What's your thoughts as a meat marketer of this volatility around the venison market and why it's been hit so hard?
Well, just while our Wagyu business is into retail and into e-commerce or home delivery, our venison as an industry is largely into food service. And so we all know what's happening with restaurants around the world. So certainly it's a tough gig, venison, right now. But it's pleasing that we've got an opportunity in the chilled season, which has already commenced through to end of October. And I see our bookings are double numbers. So we've gone to our farmers like other companies have and said, look, there's an opportunity here where we can definitely sell your product. We can pay you a reasonable price for it, although less than last year, still reasonable price, and please get them in. And we've had a great response. So we'll process double our normal numbers during that time. After that, there really is uncertain times. We're just waiting to see where the food service market goes, where the restaurants open throughout Europe. Unfortunately, it's a game of patience, but got absolute confidence that it will come right, it will come back. And we're all investing in retail and new markets along the way. So the industry will be a lot stronger from it, but it's a tough gig waiting it out, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, moving into e-commerce was naturally the future for our products to achieve higher and higher value. How has First Light's business been affected by the cost of air freight?
We try not to use air freight. So we've got a wonderful product here in New Zealand, haven't we? And one of the attributes is that we can ship it chilled by sea and still have 60 days left. So we tend to go by sea, and so sea has been largely uninterrupted so far. We've got our steak club in North America. We've got 400 members now, so we're delivering every month to those members' doors, whether it be Wagyu or whether it be venison. We've got 300 people on a waiting list now to join that club. So we're really in a good, and we think that we'll actually be able to grow this a lot quicker than it would have been otherwise. So that's one of the silver linings of COVID, but obviously there's a few other hills to climb on the way, I'm afraid.
And while I have you here, Gerard, the future of New Zealand moving from volume to value, golly gosh, it's been how long, a decade of this mantra? But we have these tatayao, the visions, these action groups, and some trying to have collaborative leadership around where we go collectively, pan-sector across this country. Do you think that we are getting ourselves in better shape to take opportunity from like the COVID?
I can probably really only talk from the red meat sector. And what I would say is that the level of camaraderie and collaboration in the sector hasn't been seen in the last 30 years as far as I can see it. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. And I think there's a number of key figureheads in the sector that are driving for change. And this will be a positive outcome, I believe, of it all, is that we'll be stronger in where we're taking our product. We'll have more control of our product through. We'll have more storytelling of the positive attributes that New Zealand's got. So certainly believe now's a good time for it to happen.
And we've been talking a lot about wool and the lack of manufacturing here and added value opportunities on farm. Do you think it's time for us to actually look at a different model similar to First Light being a marketing company as opposed to a processor, and look at more collaborative toll processing operations across all of our different food and fibres?
There's certainly a place. I'd say that First Light at 20,000 cattle a year was still quite niche. So there needs to be lots of us if we're going to change the industry. But certainly think there's room for specialist marketing as a side to the industry overall. Also, we're investing offshore and we're investing in further processing facilities. So I think that's something New Zealand can do more of as opposed to selling the raw material. But it's a tough job because obviously the volumes that we have as a nation to sell. But there's certainly room for lots of us out there. We're only in a very small part of the world, so there's lots of room left.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Gerard, before you go, you may have heard we've been talking about the best regional airport in New Zealand. I've been giving quite a plug to Gisborne and, of course, Hawke's Bay. What's your favourites? Obviously, there'll be some regulars you go in and out of, but, the unique ones. Have you flown into Stewart Island before, for instance?
Stewart Island is on the list. No, well, I'm a Gisborne boy, so I'd have to say Gisborne's looking pretty smart. Hawke's Bay will be smart when it's finished, so I would probably err to I know well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thanks for asking.
Thank you so much, Gerard. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun over the New Year period going in and out of Gisborne. Joel, just before we go, have you got your Gisborne gig back since you're staying here for New Year's?
Oh, yeah, no, I'll probably be doing that again.
I can't see you.
No, I don't have a camera.
Oh, okay, that's right. We're coming from my home to yours tonight. Yeah. Little fundamental things. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us tonight. And where you have been listening on demand, following our live shows Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday from 7 p.m, produced in alliance with the great team at Farmers Weekly. Of course, that fantastic trusted source of your agri-journalism that turns up in your newspaper and farmersweekly.co.nz, as well as the great team at Agri HQ. We will be back on Monday. As I said, I'm heading to Waihi Beach this weekend. Can't wait to have some auntie snuggles and report back on Monday. But in the meantime, good night and go well. This is Sarah's Country.